Hi, LA Progressive readers. We're back again. Dick and Sharon from LA Progressive. So nice to meet Barry Craig, who has been publishing with us since January of 2010.
Well,
15 years, a number of articles every year. Uh, how you doing, Barry?
doing great. Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah. And so Barry comes to us from Kentucky, which where we are the LA Progressive, but our focus is on progressive issues. And we have consistently found that Barry Craig is definitely a progressive. He is a deep thinker and he writes well. And he writes on issues that we care about here in Los Angeles and we should all care about across the country. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, so why I particularly like publishing Barry stuff is he's a he's retired, but he was a newspaper man. He was a college professor. He's a union guy, a Democratic Party activist from a red part of one of the deepest red states. How is it living there among so many Republicans?
Well, the minister who married us many years ago said, when you live in this part of the country, you really exist on two levels. Some people you can talk about just certain things. Others you can talk about anything. This is definitely majority talk about certain things area. Uh, Generally avoid talking about politics and religion because all it does is create heat and not light. However, I will tell you this: I'm gonna brag on my little county. Population wise, one of the smallest counties in Kentucky. And if you get on a map and look at where Carlisle County is, or Carlisle, as we say locally, uh, 6 more miles from where I live here in the Mississippi River. So we're in the extreme southwestern corner of Kentucky. We do have an active Democratic County Executive Committee with 22 members. Most of us would be considered senior citizens. But one thing about them, they are all progressive Democrats. What's fascinating to me is that they vote on economic issues, bread and butter issues. Most of them, well, a lot of them are old line union folks, and they say things like, and by the way, every time we have a meeting, we devote time to talk about our president in a rude way, I guess you would say. But anyway, they'll say things like, "How could, if you're a working class person, how could you vote for a Republican?" And what is the problem in Kentucky are these social issues, and I would say nationwide as well. One of my best union buddies, he's older than I am. I'm 75. Larry's about 80. And he said back in the day, it's the three G's: God, guns, and gays. Now you can add to that trans, you can add, but this is really, really what tipped it. Uh, Several years ago, a researcher with the Wisconsin State AFL-CIO wrote a paper, and it's called "The Right Wing Attack on the Working Class." And I've got a copy of it. It's not in print anymore, but I would be happy to send any of your readers a copy of this. She nailed it. It was last revised in 2012, but it presages Trump. It's the whole idea about using religion as a wedge, using guns as a wedge. Uh, and so, unfortunately, we've got a long way to go. I hope I live to see a change, but let's just say, let's see in it with that. I hope I can live to see a change.
Yes, yes, I know you. I agree with you. We do have a long way to go. But I always find it interesting when I come across a person like you, who is the age that you are, living in a part of the country that I suspect I would feel uncomfortable walking down the street. And I certainly would not want my son walking down the street in the communities of Kentucky. How did you come to embrace the positions that you embrace?
Well, it's a long story, but in after I graduated from, I went to Murray State University, which is a regional school here, majored in history and minored in political science, and then I added a master's in history there, and I went to work in a tire plant. It was a union plant, but I was part of management, and I got shafted every day. I worked a lot of overtime, and some of it I didn't get paid for. That made me a union militant. And going back to college again and studying history, you, obviously to me was the two things that helped the working class more than anything else was activist social democratic government, call it democratic socialist, if you will. I don't mind that term a bit, uh, and free trade unions. And so when I started teaching, the American Federation of Teachers came along. I was the first person at our community college in Paducah, Kentucky to sign a card. I was an organizer with them. And then I went through the union ranks there. I was on our our Central Labor Council in Paducah, Kentucky. I was on the state executive board. And for many years, I was the webmaster editor. So it was both practicality as well as a college experience that may be what I am. I've always been fascinated with Southern Unionists in the Civil War. Now, Kentucky was a loyal state, as I hope you know, and but there were this part of the state was very pro-Confederate. But there was a man from Mayfield, where I grew up. His name was Lucian Anderson, and this man went through this incredible metamorphosis, and it always fascinated me how he did this. He began in Graves County, Mayfield's a seat, as a conservative Whig. When the Whig Party collapsed, he became a Democrat, but he was pro-union when the Civil War began. And so the state of Kentucky declared that Confederates and Confederate sympathizers were disloyal, which they were, and they couldn't vote. So Unionists elected him to Congress in 1863. And when this man, his metamorphosis continued, he immediately threw in with the Republican majority, and he became what was called an unconditional unionist and ultimately Republican. Only 4 Kentucky members of Congress voted for the 13th Amendment, and Lucian Anderson was one of them. He also helped, his dad founded the town of Mayfield, and he was a pillar in the Presbyterian church in which I grew up. I've often wondered how this man did this, because I used to tell my students, being an abolitionist Republican in Kentucky in the 1860s, be like being a communist in the 1960s. But he was a very successful lawyer. Only I can figure is the guy, he was very likable, had a great personality. He was nice to everybody. Plus, he was from that culture. But Lucian is one of my heroes. I wrote a book about him. He was a very interesting fellow. He was kidnapped by these Confederate guerrillas in 1863 when he was congressman-elect. And they took him down into Tennessee. And the whole time they've got this guy captured, he is talking Union to them. This is a Confederate guerrilla regiment. And his lieutenant, his lieutenant says, man, said, what you say makes sense. What if we get the whole regiment together and let you give a speech? He said, not a problem if the colonel agrees. Guess what? The colonel said, no, you're not doing this. But that's the way he was. Absolutely fascinating man. I wish I knew more about him. He would have kept a diary, I'm sure, and record. But the guerrillas burned the courthouse and burned his office. But Lucian is one of my heroes. And I've always been fascinated with Southern Unionists. And they were, you think everybody in the North was for the Union, everybody in the South was Confederate. That's not true. There are pockets in the South. And they've always fascinated. So I identify, I've got Lucian's picture hanging in my study. And he's one of my heroes in history.
Yeah.
So the latest article you sent to us is titled "From Lincoln to Wallace: How the GOP Abandoned the Voting Rights Act," and one thread of it is how the two parties have changed over years. And in fact, it was moderate Republicans that forced JFK's hand to actually put forth the Voting Rights Act. Can you talk about that and how now the Republican Party is the white supremacist party, the party of George Wallace?
I've heard it joked that if Abraham Lincoln came back, he'd be a Democrat. I would also add to that, if Jefferson Davis came back, he'd be a Republican. I can just imagine what the Republican Party was founded in the 1850s in Midwest, Wisconsin, as an anti-slavery party. Now, the party was divided. The majority of Republicans are what I would call gradualists. They believed that slavery could be best destroyed by limiting its spread into the federal territories. There was a minority in the Republican Party that were abolitionists who said that slavery is immoral, it's undemocratic, and it should be abolished. Lincoln was a gradualist. So when he ran for president in 1860 and won, the Republican platform, by the way, it's online, talks about stopping the spread of slavery into the territories. Now, Lincoln was born in Kentucky, lived here, left when he was about 2 years old, went to Illinois. And So I'd ask my students, how many votes do you think Lincoln got in his home state in 1860? The answer is 1,366. It's less than 1%. He wasn't even on the ballot in the 10 of the future Confederate states, Virginia being an exception. And so the Republican Party is the party of civil rights activism. It's the party of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. They championed black suffrage. And then in 1877, we have what's called the Compromise of 1877. The election between Rutherford B. Hayes, sometimes called Rutherford B. Hayes, and Samuel Tilden was disputed. And so this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And finally, the Democrats and the Republicans got together and hammered out what you might call a gentleman's agreement. The Republicans said, look, if you'll step aside and let Hayes win, we will appoint a Southerner to the cabinet and we'll remove the remaining federal troops from the South. And so that was the sellout right there. Absolutely right there. Now, part of the reason they did that, by 1877, the Republicans had lost their reformist zeal to some extent. They were more interested in going south where the labor was cheap and that the Democratic Party down there was going to keep the unions out. They're still doing that. Of course. But having said that, the Republican Party continued on until the 1860s. It all began with Barry Goldwater, who was a senator from Arizona. And Goldwater opposed the civil rights laws. And he began to talk about states' rights, which, of course, is the old Southern code word for slavery and Jim Crow afterwards. Then it really kicks off with Nixon's Southern strategy. Now, the South was a Democratic bastion. They were all white supremacist Democrats. Right. And so Nixon and the Republicans thought, here's a real opportunity to harvest a lot of votes if we'll just turn around and try to win them over. Now, Nixon wasn't as overtly racist as Wallace was, but he used words like law and order, the silent majority. Those were code words, and they picked up on it. And then Reagan, he kicked into high gear. In 1980, when Ronald Reagan ran for president, his first campaign stop was in Neshoba County, Mississippi. Right. And that's where the 3 civil rights workers were murdered in 1964, buried in a dam. And Reagan got up there in this all-white crowd and said, I'm for states' rights. And they understood exactly. So what does Reagan talk about? Welfare queens. Now, Trump, as one of my buddies, historian at Murray State, says, he turned the dog whistle into a bullhorn. Yeah. I have never seen this overt racism. I was watching TV a little while ago. He's going to put these troops in all these cities. Well, guess what? All have black mayors. Yeah. All are majority minority. Quite a coincidence, don't you think? It's incredible. Hegseth is Secretary of the Army. He wants to put these Confederate monuments back in national cemeteries. Those national cemeteries were made for Union veterans, not rebels. How much farther this is going to go, God only knows. But to paraphrase Thomas Paine, we live in soul-trying times.
Yes, we do. And we really need to hear from people like you who have researched history, these coded terms, states' rights, law and order. There's a whole generation, a couple of generations where they don't know what that means. They don't know that right. Language. Having lived for many decades, you have the benefit of at least living through some of this. And so some of your knowledge comes from lived experience. And then in your case, your knowledge comes both from lived experience, right. From education.
I grew up at the tail end of Jim Crow. Mayfield was segregated. I grew up in an all-white neighborhood. The first black child I actually physically came in contact with was the fellow who picked up our trash. He had a mule-drawn wagon with car tires on it, and he brought his son with him. We played and played pitch and ball, and I showed him my new Bell Telephone toy truck. That's the first time I physically came in contact. That's how segregated it was. If you were black, you couldn't get a meal in a restaurant. You had to go around back, do a takeout, or eat in the kitchen. I mean, it was rigid here. But I will tell you this one personal experience, and this really jarred me, is The schools are desegregated at Brown v. Board, and all deliberate speed. Well, I guess that depends how you define that. So I was in the 7th or 8th grade, and this black guy met. And of course, lots of times, well, you know, when you all were kids, first thing you meet somebody, says, where does your daddy work? Well, I said, well, my daddy works at the General Tire plant here. So where's your daddy work? He said, my dad is a Presbyterian preacher. And I said, where? He said, right here in Mayfield. And boy, this wheel started turning then. I thought the only black faces in the Presbyterian church in Mayfield was the janitor and an older woman who kept the kids in the nursery. And then I began to think about, there's a picture on the wall. It's a well-known picture. I call him the Belgian Jesus. He has green eyes and brown hair. And I thought that profoundly affected me in the rest of my life. I thought, well, there are certain Christians that they're not welcome in that church. Now the church is desegregated today, but that was back in, 1962 or 3. That's what it was. And it's astonishing how things have changed. We got a hell of a long way to go. And what is it? 2 steps forward and 1 back, and we're maybe 6 steps back with Reagan.
Like I said, it's fascinating to me that you would have this conversation with this young boy, and I guess you were in middle school age?
Yeah, we called it junior back then.
You're right, yes, and you were profoundly impacted.
That was.
That's unusual. There are so many people who are there just oblivious to. They have absolutely no empathy, no interest, and they don't even notice.
Well, I'll tell you the rest of the story, which is fascinating. We had a devastating tornado that hit Mayfield. We had moved away. We're 23 miles west, destroyed the town. It was all over the national news. And a woman who's a writer, a white woman, wrote this story about Mayfield as she remembered it. It was just happy, happy stuff. Well, a woman wrote a rebuttal of that and said, that's not the Mayfield I knew. Son of a gun, her last name was Horton. This guy's name was Cecil Horton. It was in Lexington paper. And I said, so I do write for that paper sometime. And so I asked the editor, I said, have you got this woman's email address? I did. Emailed her. She lives in Sacramento, and Cecil Horton's her brother. So I called him up after all these years. He said, I don't remember that. I said, well, I didn't think you would, because it affected me more than you. And that's the story. But it was absolutely fact. So we talked on the phone 2 or 3 times after that. She'd call me. We'd talk about Mayfield. She grew up in Mayfield. But again, the schools are segregated. The schools, when books were worn out, desks were worn out, that went to the black school. And when black teachers were paid less than white teachers. And that was during the Jim Crow era. And again, that has changed. I will say this, I'll brag on Mayfield High School, where I graduated barely in 1967. It is the most cosmopolitan football team. It's Hispanic, it's black, it's white. It's amazing to see it. That in fact, that's been written about in some papers in the state. So I'm kind of proud of my old hometown in that respect. But we still have a long way to go.
So yeah, you talk about 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but right currently it seems like we've reversed it.
I was going to say it's now 6 steps back
forward and now 2 steps back. So what threat currently is the Voting Rights Act under?
What is it under?
Yeah, well, of course, the thing about it is, as you know, with Shelby County versus Holder, this Voting Rights Act was gutted. And I'm definitely of the opinion with this 6-3 majority court, they're going to go after it again and again and again until it's gone. So I wonder what's next. Plessy versus Ferguson 2. Yeah. I don't know how far this will go. This stuff is so unbelievable. But I'll tell you this, in 1877, well, after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are passed, a lot of these old abolitionists thought, this is it. We'll never go back. We'll never go back. What happens after 1877? Jim Crow lasts till the 1960s. And so you think, and I've had historians tell me that this is where we are again. We're in one of those go back moments like 1877. That's been written about. It's frightening.
Yeah.
Trump, I don't know whether to call him an authoritarian or a fascist. I mean, or whatever. But he is doing things that even Nixon didn't dream, even Bush didn't dream. You know, and the Voting Rights Act, as you know, was repeatedly renewed all these years, and it'll be gone. It'll be gone. And and of course I used to tell my students this term states' rights. What does that mean? It means the right of states to have slaves. It means the right of states to segregate blacks on a less than equal basis. And that's what we're going back. And the Republican Party is lily white, with a few exceptions. We were down in East Tennessee a couple of years ago visiting with some friends. We had this little old tourist train, a steam train that went up in the mountains. And this county in North Carolina, the Republican Party was having a big gathering that weekend, and they had Confederate flags and Trump flags. And they fly in tandem down here. Very often you'll see that. It's just like they're coming back.
Okay. I would like to maintain, Barry, they're not coming back. They've never left.
That's true. Oh, that's an excellent point. It brings up a friend of mine, Brian Clardy, who I've quoted in there. I use Brian as one of my top sources. He grew up in a little town in northwest Tennessee, just over the border. He went to Obama's first inauguration. He was in the crowd. It's a thrilling story the way he tells it. And he sat there, and this woman next to him said, they were standing, says, "Isn't this wonderful?" He said, "Yes, it is. But back home, they are seething." Right. And you look what happened next. You've got the Tea Party movement, which is race-based, and the whole thing. The essence of Donald Trump is racism. It is exactly what it is. The racism has been part of American history going back to the colonial period, and it's that's simply it. Yeah. But what you said, that reminded me of what Brian had said. They are seething at home.
Well, if you ask Black people, when we think about the inauguration of President Obama, at the time, I was working at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory right here in Southern.
Oh, yeah. And JPL. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I worked for JPL for 23 years, but that's where I really learned about racism. And when Barack Obama was inaugurated, I remember going back to work that Monday, and the chill in the air. Now, mm-hmm. I was located in a congressional district that had a Republican congressman. Mm-hmm.
David Dreyer.
David Dreyer? No. Mm-hmm. It sounds right. Okay. Yeah, right. Peter. Oh, yeah. So believe me, in my entire life, I have never not experienced a feeling of racism when in those environments. So what we're
I'll tell you another story
of what's always just below the surface.
It is. I'll tell you another story that kind of parallels that. When I do a lot of freelance writing. I was writing for a publication in Louisville, our largest city. And I was over talking to 3 women who were registering voters in Mayfield, and they had Obama posters around. And here comes this pickup truck rolling up, and I'm thinking, oh boy. And these 2 guys got out. Both of them were in their teens, 20s, with sandblasted heads, and I thought, oh my God, what are we going to do? Maybe I can hit it with this camera. I don't know what I can do. These 2 guys come walking up, and one of them said, "Excuse me." I thought, well, that's nice. They normally wouldn't say excuse me before they beat the hell out of it. They would just say, he said, "Listen," he says, you all need to know this. I said, well, what do we need to know? He said, "We're both ROTC students at Texas A&M. And we have a summer job selling books in rural Western Kentucky and Western Tennessee. We go house to house." And they both said, "We are afraid for Barack Obama. What we're hearing, they're threatening to kill him. The N-word is flying right and left." He said, "We have never seen such hatred in our lives." And they said, "Look, don't get us wrong. So we're Republicans. We're going to vote Republican. But we think this is horrible, what these people are saying about the Democratic nominee." Yeah. And I said, yep, that's about right. And it's the same. And again, Reagan didn't invent racism. He just exploited it. Hitler didn't invent anti-Semitism. He exploited it. one of my friends, a historian, said Trump has this uncanny knack to bring out the worst in people, to pander to the hate, and it's Hitler was the same way. But all we can do is well, Kentucky's not going to vote Democratic for years, but as my wife says, Kentucky is not the country, and I said, thank God. You do live in a blue state, and that's great. I mean, I'm thrilled what Gavin Newsom is doing. I hope he he sticks it in a certain place where the sun doesn't shine with Trump. And I love that. I mean, Democrats are finally fighting back. You know, these are times when if they're going to fight dirty, the Democrats got to fight dirty. In fact, I'll send you a piece I wrote about that. I polled some people about what do they think. Now, fight fire with fire, give them hell. The Democrats have to do this, because if you sit back and try to play fair, well, if you're in a game, in a card game, and somebody's cheating and you're playing fair, that doesn't work out. So I'm pleased what the governor of New York is doing. I love the governor of Illinois. Pritzker, Illinois touches us. Hey, he's great. And Gavin Newsom, I mean, whatever else he's done wrong, he got this right. I mean, he is telling Trump to stick it.
Yeah, I'm four square behind Newsom too. Not every Democrat out here is, but I think, yeah, he's given him back both barrels in a way that sets Trump. Because
he is. Well, Harry Truman said they call him "Give him hell, Harry."
Yeah,
and he said no. He said I tell the truth, and they think it's hell. And
yeah.
I love that quote from him. And Truman's running mate, Alvin Barkley, was from Paducah, where I taught. He grew up there. But we're fighting the good fight best we can. I will tell you, there's a fantastic group in Paducah, Indivisible Group. It's called Four Rivers Indivisible. You look them online. They're a branch of the national group. Since January the 1st, they have had 18 protest rallies in Paducah. 18. And Paducah went for Trump by about 60%. And my favorite rally, of course, the congressman from this district is James Comer.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, Indivisible decided they would try to force him to having a town hall meeting. Well, he's not going to do that. So back in the winter, I love this. I covered this for another publication I write for. And they said, we're going to have 5 people put on yellow chicken suits, bright yellow chicken suits with a big feet on them. And they went out there and protested in front of his field office in Paducah. And it made him mad. Oh, he got upset about that. So his flunkies send out a statement. I am not going to have a town hall for the benefit of these left-wing radical people who have Trump derangement syndrome. And I told the organizer, I said, you had a home run with this. You made him mad. Normal politician would have said nothing or said something like, well, they have the right to protest. He got mad. Yeah. And when you can make them mad, you've done it. And so I was at one of their protests about a week ago. Weather's extremely hot here, but they're out there sweating and they do it in public, and they get a lot of honking. A lot of people honk their horn and wave, and not too many actually, and they're still doing it. And they're all, well, the 2 leaders are definitely retirement age. So I keep telling my students, it's we old people. We're the ones that get involved. We're the ones that vote. And I tell them it's because we're too old to do anything else. We can't play ball anymore, so we just vote. It's true. You understand? And again, if we could now, unfortunately, a lot of people in my Democratic old white guy vote the wrong way, vote the other way. But there are those. You'll be so gratified to go to one of these meetings, and these were all natives of this area, and they all just detest Trump. They're teachers. A lot of them worked in this tire plant in Mayfield. But there are 22 of us, and we're keeping the faith. And
we're so glad you are. Now, I do want to touch on this fighting fire with fire message.
Okay.
Because what I have observed with both in studying history and in my own lived experience is that the thing that we tend to not do is uncover and uproot white supremacy. And that is really the foundation that has caused this continual resurgence that we're seeing now and what we've seen, throughout history. We think that, okay, we've eradicated. We've got a Voting Rights Act, or, we voted for and elected a Black president. But no, it keeps coming back like a whack-a-mole. And
It does.
keeps coming back is that we have not intentionally uncovered and uprooted the source of the problem. So we can fight fire with fire, but that fire is coming back in the next generation.
That's a good point. But I think that we like to believe as human beings that things are going to get better and better and better. Now, I was never one who believed that America was post-racial after Obama was elected. I didn't believe that. And my friend Brian Clardy, he said, "You're right about that." I don't understand, and what just kills me, these people are supposed to be Christians. Now, I'm not a theologian, but I believe the good book says we're supposed to. It's the golden rule. It's very simple. Love thy neighbor as thyself. In other words, do unto others. That's very simple, but yet it goes right over their heads. What distresses me about the Christian church is so much of it in these rural areas, it's based on hate. What is it about human beings? And I think this is what you're getting at. What is it about human beings? We've got to hate somebody. We've got to hate somebody. And I've never understood that as to, and again, if you look at, and again, I'm not a theologian. In fact, I hardly ever go to church. But my wife goes to she's a pillar in the Presbyterian Church. What in that, where do you get to hate somebody because of their race or their religion or their sexual orientation or whatever? Where does that come from?
I think
it's the perversion of religion.
Yes.
And I'll tell you this, I had a professor who, very wise man, said more blood has been shed in the name of religion than anything else on earth. You think about that. And we had a friend who was retired. He was a beef feeder at the Tower of London. I love what he said. He said, the trouble with British history is we've had too many Catholics, too many Protestants, and not enough Christians. I thought that was very well put. Yeah, really well put.
Yeah.
But it's an intractable. Yeah. But what we've got to do is keep trying. And what you do was with kids. You start our son. We and of course, first thing, as soon as he graduates from college, he said, "I'm getting out of here." And I said, "I can't blame you. I'm sorry." So he goes to Louisville, which is this nice little blue island in this state. But you got to start with kids. It starts with the parents. What's that song? You got to be taught to hate and to fear. And it's true. When a baby is born, it's a tabula rasa. You've got to put that in their head, good or bad. And we tried. In fact, we said we got married in the 70s, back in the 70s. So we naturally rolled our own vows. That was cool back then. And in our vows, we said we pledge to make our home a place of welcome for anybody, regardless of race, creed, color, religion, anything. And that was in our wedding vows. And that's what we tried to do. We're both members of the Mayfield NAACP chapter. And we're trying to do that. But it's a hard problem. If we knew the answer to that, we could do. But it is. But I would just simply say that you start with your children, individuals, and I would also admonish some of these Christians is practice what you preach. And again, Jesus taught love over hate, peace over war, charity over greed, brother and sister over bigotry and exclusion. That's in the Bible. And but it's a terrible perversion of that, God,
So Barry, we're thrilled to talk to you. This has been a wonderful interview.
Oh, anytime. I love to gab.
Yeah, and you're a professor, and I love.
Well, yeah. So, I years ago we were in Ireland. I kissed the Blarney Stone. My friend said we couldn't tell any difference at all because my wife says you talk too much. Well, that's how you get to know people. And our son, Dad, why do you talk to me? I said, because you get to know people. You talk. I love to talk and visit and gab.
Well, so good. So we'll connect with you in the future. This was wonderful.
Anytime.
We're so pleased that you and your compatriots are putting up the good battle there in the red part of the red state. Yeah, Kentucky may not turn anytime soon, but it'll never turn if people like you don't stand up and fight the tide.
Well, that's exactly right. It's just we're all driven to do this. We're having a meeting this Monday night, and we'll be still pitching. That's all we can do. So, and I do appreciate you publishing my musings for Lowly. Man, I didn't realize it's that long, but I guess it is. And I've got some more in the can for you. I'm working on, although I am 75 years old and officially retired, I guess, but I'll keep writing until I can't anymore. And I hope that'll be 10 years at least, before or 20 years, let's hope,
Yeah, same here. I'm in the same boat in several ways.
How old are you all? How old are you all, by the way?
I'm 78 and she's much younger.
I'm 68.
That's funny. My wife is 69 and I'm 75, so it's about the same span.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
very good, Barry.
Thank you so much, Barry. And
Thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
We'll be doing this again. I really enjoyed
Please
it.
do. I enjoyed it. Call anytime.
All righty.
Thanks.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.